presenters up.
Okay, so somebody needs to change our names.
Oh, yeah, we'll take those off.
Okay.
Well, no, this panel. So while you're enjoying your lunch, we have two great speakers, and I'm going to just bring them up and let them begin. First is Torrey Gaddis. A lot of you may or may not know Torrey. You've probably read something he wrote with the Houston Chronicle. At least you've been in Houston very long. He is with the Center for Opportunity Urbanism, and you already heard several people mention max lanes. If you wondered where that idea came from, I think Torrey may be the author of it here in Houston at least, and he's going to share with you some of the work that he has done and help you understand what this concept is and what it could mean to our area. So Torrey?
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. So as Alan mentioned, I'm with the Center for Opportunity Urbanism, which is a local think tank. Joel Kotkin is our director. We have been promoting the concept of managed express lanes, max lanes for short, and with a branding, Bob, you brought up branding, moving the maximum number of people at maximum speed. I try to say that tagline whenever I can, because I think it's the kind of thing that the public can kind of get it when they see it, that, oh yeah, maximum number of people, maximum speed, that makes perfect sense. So kind of diving right in here, obviously, I'm not the first person to say this in this room or in previous meetings. We got to think outside the box. I think everybody recognizes that our freeway widenings are reaching their limits, and that honestly, commuter rail is not a great fit with decentralized Sunbelt cities. Houston has multiple job centers. We have less than 7% of our jobs are downtown. And then the recent Los Angeles case study where they have twice our density, they have perfect walking weather year round, they spent $9 billion on rail and they experienced a ridership decline. The LA Times was getting into this. So they're kind of the case study of how hard it is to make rail work in a decentralized Sunbelt city. And I would kind of say if Houston starts looking at commuter rail solutions, why do we think we can do it better than LA? I mean, what is it when they've got all of those conditions working in their favor? So I just kind of getting a little visionary, the commute of the future. Visualize high speed, no intermediate stops, no transfers. You go to a park and ride lot, and there's an express bus option to every major job center. You got downtown, you got Med Center, Uptown, Greenway, all of them. And when you get in that bus and it goes up into the managed express lanes, you get a driver just puts it in autonomous mode and you accelerate maybe up to 100 plus miles an hour down that lane if it's autonomous only. This is down the road when these vehicles become available. It eventually exits the job center and it circulates to get people near their building. Again, Bob, you brought up, branding, something that the world would recognize, the same as Curitiba. If we have autonomous buses going 100 miles an hour providing commuter service, that is definitely going to be something that would create a buzz around the world in terms of commuter transit that very few or nobody really is doing anything at that level. So these are just some examples of what these kind of lanes sort of look like. They're not using the same branding, but you see the protected lanes down the middle. Here's another example in Baltimore. Obviously, everybody here is familiar with the ones we have out on the west side on I-10. Long list of advantages, and I'm just going to walk through these pretty quickly, but high-speed ride, nonstop transit service. One of the advantages that I think, one of the things that Houston deals with is that we are a very hot, humid climate, as you all know. People, the joke I make is that we were built around the car because it's the only way to bring an air conditioner with you everywhere you go. And being able to provide, in normal transit circles, talking about transfers or walking is a pretty normal thing, but in Houston, people just are really resistant to that because it can be somewhat painful to be outside several months of the year here. So being able to offer that sort of single seat ride, flexible, adaptable routes and service, being able to do public and private vehicles. Somebody mentioned Chariot earlier. I was recently out in Silicon Valley, and you see Google offers theirs, Yahoo has theirs, Facebook has theirs. They're running express buses from the city down to their campuses. Being able to do really granular routes and vehicle sizing. So, for example, if you've got a ton of demand from a park and ride to downtown, maybe what you do is you say, okay, we've got one express bus that goes to the west side of downtown and one express bus that goes to the east side of downtown. And so when it circulates, it stays in that part of downtown and gives people shorter time till they're getting off their bus and getting to their office building. You can really tune the vehicles and the routes to exactly where people want to go. Being able to do policy tuning with these managed express lanes, congestion pricing, high occupancy vehicle, eventually making them autonomous only. That's the future ready. At which point they can go very high speed and start platooning, which means very close together spacing because they're all talking to each other in autonomous mode. These lanes can be more affordable versus rail. They can be revenue generating, which opens up the private financing option when you do congestion pricing. More efficient than a general purpose lane in terms of moving people per hour. Worker productivity. So I recently saw a statistic that the average worker today is doing 2.5 hours of email every day. Think of the benefit to employers if they knew their employees could do an hour of that every day on the bus instead of driving when you can't do email, right? That is a real productivity benefit that employers could see if more and more of their employees are riding these buses every day. Environmental and congestion relief benefits, and then a new one that I've just added after Harvey. Wesley Highfield, I saw a quote in one of his articles, or an article where he talked about having, it's great that our road system is designed to hold water. It's a good kind of last resort flooding hold reservoir, so to speak, but it did obviously impede mobility around the city, having the freeway network underwater. And if these lanes were elevated, you would have a network that first responders could use, evacuees could use to get around the city during another Harvey-type flooding event. So in our report, and by the way, the report is in your binder that lays out all the details here, but Houston's challenge, is our future one of hollowing out or not? We've got rising congestion. We've got some employers starting to abandon the core like Exxon and Shell that are saying, it's better for my employees to be out near the woodlands than to be in the center of the city. What is our long-term trajectory going to be? Are we going to have job growth in the core or on the edges? Are we going to have a healthy core or a stagnant core? And I think that really mobility is going to be critical to that. I think Bob mentioned it earlier with downtown, the long distance commutes. If the employees can't live where they want to live and get to their employers, the employers are going to move to them. So the framework we laid out was, I call it tongue-in-cheek a little bit, Maximilian. So if our metro area is going to grow to half the size of New York, can we support half a Manhattan in terms of our core job centers? So New York's about 20 million in the metro, about 2 million jobs in Manhattan. We're going to be 10 million in the metro. Could we support 1 million jobs in these 7 job centers? So we define the core in 2 groups. One is the core 4, there with Uptown, Greenway, downtown, the medical center. And then if you expand it out a little bit and add the next 3 of Memorial Energy Corridor and West Chase, right now that adds up to 626,000 jobs. Could that grow to 1 million over the next 20 or 30 years? Couldn't we provide enough mobility to move 1 million people and support 1 million commuters, 1 million jobs in those job centers? And the proposal that we came up with was the Core Max idea, which is if we can get a 2x2 max lane loop in that core loop area right there, then what you have is as the spoke freeways are upgraded or changed over time, they can plug into that loop and instantly offer express access to all those job centers. If you add in the max lanes, the Katy lanes, then you'll get all 7 job centers. But the core loop, so you eventually add max lanes up from 288, you add them up from 69, they plug into that loop, and instantly any vehicle coming up those lanes can access any of those job centers. Now, the question is, engineering-wise, that's our next question, is how feasible is that to do? Is that elevated? Getting through downtown is the hardest part. It is not currently in TxDOT's plans to extend max lanes through downtown. They all terminate there. They do not continue through. So a lot of open questions here. But as far as the capacity of these lanes, the name of this task force, high capacity, we looked at the Lincoln Tunnel exclusive bus lane in New York. They move 1,850 buses with 74,000 people during their morning rush hour at 35 mile an hour average speeds. It's a single tunnel that goes into Manhattan, a single lane tunnel. A bus is entering that tunnel every 8 seconds during that commute out time. If you take that, but then you say, if we eventually make the max lanes bus only, we double deck those buses like Megabus does, we eventually make them autonomous only with platooning and higher speeds, we think it's possible to get to 2 to 4 times the capacity of a Lincoln Tunnel. So you'd be looking at 150 to 300,000 people can move down one of these lanes during a typical commute, which is a huge amount of capacity. So there are a lot of still challenges and issues to be worked out with the max lanes concept. How do we interconnect them? You obviously can't do a full set of flying ramps to connect, say, 610 max lanes with 45 or 59? Could we do it with an innovative traffic circle, especially if you assume autonomy in the future and that the autonomous vehicles could handle a kind of traffic circle connection efficiently without accidents? Modifying existing TxDOT plans around downtown and 610 West, the express lanes that they're looking at out there, could they fit into this concept with some modifications? Should we eventually look at converting free or existing toll lanes? I'd say especially at Beltway 8 on the west side. Should they be looking at making a left lane a max lane with the congestion pricing? What's the right agency to oversee these lanes, and especially setting good policy? You really kind of want to take politics out of the policy and just say our goal is maximum people at maximum speed, and we're going to tune the policy over time to keep that happening. Are going to be able to make the hard decisions around congestion pricing or around bus only, autonomous only, those sorts of decisions when they have to be made. Public versus private operators, both on the P&R lots, park and ride lots, and the vehicles. Could we use mall parking lots? Could we use underutilized church parking lots for park and rides? Could we be, could there be corporate vehicles? Could there be, obviously, the outer counties, things like the Woodlands Express, using these lanes? Could private operators, for instance, corporate shuttles, use the metro park and ride lots to provide service? And then finally, public versus private financing and all the different ways that could be done. So that's just a really quick overview. Like I said, the rest is in your report, in your binder, and I'll take questions now. Karin?
One of the things that we're all going to be looking for is innovative financing sources and what makes the most sense cost-wise. What do max lanes cost relative to light rail when the costs are all in? That's something I've never gotten my own head around, and just wondered if you've done any work on this, because light rail is terribly expensive. We know of instances where it has not been cost effective, although I would argue the red line certainly is, and our
Absolutely.
others are coming on very, very well. However, when you're really comparing roadways to transit, have you done any thinking on how you really do an all-in cost comparison? Maybe not yet, but I just am interested because, there's so many costs to roadways and highways and maintenance, et cetera, that it seems to me are brushed under the rug, where you said, oh, rail is so expensive. Well, yes, of course, but so are highways. So have you done any kind of comparison on that?
I've got a microphone here, but have not yet, probably more in phase 2, which we're working out right now. But I've heard that argument before and debated and discussed, and I think what you have to keep in mind is it's not like only choose rail or only choose roads. The road network is a pre-existing gigantic asset that we have already created. It is a sunk cost. The question is, do you keep spending relatively small amounts of money improving and tuning and making that better, or do you say, no, we're now going to take the big leap and pour money into this alternative system that doesn't yet really exist?
Yeah, but let me just, and I'm not arguing with you because neither of us has the empirical data yet.
Right.
But assume a light rail line is put on top of a highway, instead of max lanes. Of course, max lanes use platooning buses that possibly could be more flexible, than a rail line, et cetera. So there are lots of all-in thoughts. But, I look forward to phase 2.
Yeah, okay.
On
Yeah.
the analysis.
I think it's,
all-in costs.
you're going to have, if you look at, I certainly would not want to have a situation in Houston long-term like you're seeing in the Northeast, where the transit agencies are severely underfunded and not able to invest in the maintenance on their rail networks. And you're seeing major issues in New York and Washington, D.C. right now, where they have severely underinvested in their maintenance for a long time, and it's now starting to seriously affect their cities, and it's billions and billions of dollars of backlog. Here you're basically putting a concrete strip in place, and then people have to provide their own costs for the vehicles, and that's a big difference, right? Right there, you're kind of offloading. Now, in Metro's case, you are paying for and running the buses, but if there are private shuttles, private buses, private vehicles, that's somebody else's cost that the taxpayer is not having to pick up. to refresh those vehicles, to fuel those vehicles, that sort of thing. Sure.
When we talk about the max lanes and the additional capacity of cars that will be, in service and being able to move more people, we still have to be able to park these cars once we get them downtown. And so, what is the thought with regard to parking once we've increased by threefold the amount of vehicles driving into the city? What do we do with those cars while those folks are at work?
So, well, first, I mean, the core function of the network is for shuttles and transit vehicles to use, and then cars are sort of a nice to have as long as we can, and we can collect the toll and the congestion pricing, that sort of thing. Obviously, yeah, right now you've got a parking issue. Long term, they're looking at autonomous cars that go off and park themselves. You may have people riding autonomous shared vehicles like Uber and Lyft when they take the drivers out. That, matter of fact, they're saying that that's one of the first places you'll see the autonomous cars is in the shared fleets, because they'll be willing to invest right away to roll those out. The private fleets, people are going to keep their cars 5, 10, 15 years before they sell and buy in. It's going to take a long time to turn that over. But if you've got an autonomous fleet, no problem. You've got I could see a scenario where you have an Uber SUV that has 6 little compartments in it. You get in, it picks up 3 or 4 other people, it goes downtown, it drops them off, it picks people up that are doing that reverse commute like Bob talked about, going out to the energy corridor, and it takes them out there. And so those vehicles are circulating all the time and providing service all the time, and rather than parking. Carol?
Thank you. So let me make sure I understand the concept. You're talking about taking existing roadways and then utilizing them differently. Is that correct or incorrect?
Well,
before I ask the question?
In some cases, in other cases, I think they're built new.
Okay.
Rather than, obviously, converting free to this will have some public backlash.
And
I think
that was
longer term, you're going to want. I think that's still possible longer term. Once you've proven the system and people see how many people move in these max lanes and that they are more efficient uses of right-of-way, then you might eventually get to public support saying, okay, let's convert the left lane on the 610 loop to a max lane because we see the benefits of that.
All
But
right.
obviously, you got to prove it to the public first, right?
And that was going to be my question. I was going to basically ask the question how you thought about this public acceptance, because we've seen both locally and nationally a very low tolerance for not just changing how we do things.
Mm-hmm.
And so just as an example, your max lanes are not that different from the managed lanes, are they?
Honestly, a lot of it is the branding. When you brand as high occupancy or you brand as toll, those are both kind of negative brands for people. You're telling me, oh, I can't use it unless I'm high occupancy. I can't use it unless I pay a toll. You brand it as max. We're moving maximum people at maximum speed. And sometimes we're going to use congestion pricing for that. Sometimes we're going to require buses, autonomous. People get that. Like that's the public, I think, will be much more supportive of a brand like that you're moving as many people as you can, as fast as you can through whatever concrete or space you've got. That's a better branding that I hope over time will attract more public support.
That was my question.
You may have mentioned this. I'm sorry, I was eating, and if you did, I missed it.
Don't worry.
Are there other cities that have done this, and is there a track record with this in other municipalities?
As a matter of fact, in your binder, our report has an entire appendix with several examples of other cities. They are not using the max branding. That is somewhat unique here, but they are creating separated express lanes that they manage, whether they manage it with congestion pricing. Again, like the hot branding, high occupancy toll, which is like a double negative branding that you're using on the public, both tolling and high occupancy.
And at speeds of over 100 miles per hour?
Oh, nobody's doing that yet. So when you get to that, that's a 10-year future autonomous only. I'm looking forward to Sam's presentation, where you can say, we're going to make these lanes autonomous only. Therefore, we don't have to worry about a human driver doing something crazy in this lane. Once they're all autonomous and they're talking to each other, then they can start to safely go 100 miles an hour.
Okay.
So this is a 2030 kind of thing, maybe 2025, depending on how the technology evolves.
Thank you.
Hi. With the max lanes, would they be an either-or concept between the max lanes versus light rail, or would they coexist together?
Oh, absolutely, they'd coexist. I feel like max lanes are going to be ideal for the long distance commute, and then light rail seems to work well in the sort of neighborhood, things like the medical center to downtown. That's where light rail works fantastically. When you start to do long distance light rail and you have to stop every couple of miles and pick people up and then they have to connect, you start to work out the commute times and they get pretty severe. You're net speeding out to 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour. And then they're not even getting to their building. They've got to figure something out at each end. And people, I think when you ask a lot of people about light rail, they love the riding experience. But once they do it on a long distance commute, one of our fellows did the DFW into downtown Dallas on the light rail. And he said it was a very nice ride, but it took well over an hour because once you made all the connections and the waits and the stops, it just was a long time. When he said I could have taken an Uber in probably 20, 25 minutes, I could have gotten downtown from DFW. So it's hard to overcome that with rail. Other questions? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tori. Yes, absolutely. And now I'd like to bring Sam Lott up. Sam has worked on high-capacity transit and its implementation not only across our country but in many places around the world. We're privileged to have him here. He is now with Texas Southern University's Transportation Center. We're pleased to have them as one of our partner agencies in the work on high-capacity transit. So, Sam, I'm going to just have you start right off.
So we'll see. I'm not sure if this is the same presentation version that I have. The title's different, but let's go through it. It could be that some of mine are old. And I think I use one of these to change the slide. Okay. Some of you, I was talking with Mayor Reed earlier, and to give him a connection on who I was, I said, I'm the guy that's done commuter rail studies. And he said, oh, yeah, I know who you are. That's what many of you have known me as. But actually, for the last 40 years, my main specialty has been fully automated transit systems. And in particular, in the last year with Texas Southern, my work has been getting my head around the new automated roadway vehicle technology. And I was the principal investigator on a study that was done under the TRB auspices to look at the implications of automated vehicle technology for transit operations in terms of the laws and the regulations, and then the practical policy aspects. And through that, I've learned that the world is bringing a policy framework to the future where the existing blends, the existing transit modes and transportation modes are being blended in with the future of automated vehicles. And that's what I would like to talk to you about for purposes of this group and our objectives. It's important that we think outside the Houston box. I'm sorry that's a term that's been used a lot. It happened to already be in my slide. We need to think about a high-capacity transit policy framework that stays ahead of massive congestion that's coming at us. The thing that changes the perspective of, well, that works today, we can tweak a few things and it'll work better tomorrow, that can never be forgotten, is that we are going to double in size. And in fact, we will add 1 million people in the urban core, and we'll probably add 4 to 5 million people around the suburban and surrounding edges of the region. And so the high-capacity transit service and technology that we develop here together over the next months has to be implementable on a regional scale to sustain mobility, because the majority of the people are going to move to the outer band of the region, and they're going to be commuting into where the work will be, which is in the urban core primarily. And it takes 20 or 30 years to formulate a plan and design it and implement it when you're talking about major new transportation infrastructure. Traffic congestion in the 2040-2050 timeframe is going to be massive. Karin showed some of the forecasts of HGAC. This is one. It's focused in on the West Loop, probably because I drive that several times a day. I live in this area. And the demand to capacity color coding is red means the demand is over the capacity. And when you add demand over capacity, even if it's just 1.2, 1.3, a couple are shown here that are highlighted that are 1.5, and you combine that for this period, which is 3 hours in a row of that, you have tens of thousands of vehicles that have not been able to pass through the segments that the demand that wanted to go through that segment. So you have tens of thousands of vehicles that have propagated back in the system. They're still there, still trying to get through. So at the end of this peak period, you have what I call latent demand that's stacked back into the network. I also use the term cascading congestion in some of my studies when I look at operational effects. And level of service F in this part of the region is going to last all day long. Now, why would I say that? 5 years ago, I did some operational specific analysis of the region as part of a TxDOT study, and we looked at the time intervals, time throughout the day, and when the demand to capacity says segment A overloads, what in effect happens is the part of the demand that couldn't get through stacks back in congestion queues and becomes level of service F operations in segments that didn't show they were going to be over capacity. And so that cascading congestion of level of service F or breakdown flow, it's bumper to bumper, the worst of 610 loop as we know it today, is going to occur over many more segments than just those that are overloaded. And in fact, it will continue throughout the day was what my operational study showed, and this was just the 2035 time frame that we were modeling. I actually increased the capacity substantially with the expectation that new technology is going to allow us to operate these roads at capacities far beyond what human drivers can do today. And in spite of that, the congestion continues well into the evening. Some segments of the network, at least as it existed in the regional model 5 years ago when we did the study, didn't clear until about midnight. My message is this. This continuous exceeding of highway capacity, roadway capacity, has implications cumulatively that stretch throughout the connecting roadway system. And by connecting, the key is wherever one road segment connects to another road segment, the congestion can stack back into those segments, and operationally they're impacted just as if they were over capacity. And this includes HOV and managed lanes that have to have connecting ramps to the main freeway lanes or to the service roads that themselves may be in massive congestion. And so I can't emphasize enough that by judging what we need to do to perfect the operational system we have today, and forgetting that we're going to be twice as big as a region 20 or 30 years from now, and massive congestion will cripple much of what we know today to be, oh, it's bad for an hour or two, and then it gets better. This is the fatal flaw we can get into in our thinking. What is the paradigm shift that we're facing? What are the impacts of vehicle automation, things I've been thinking about a lot? I will say this, capacities are going to increase substantially. The thing that's missing from most of the dialogue, and it's based on work that I've done in automated transit and demand responsive automated transit through analytical modeling, people forget about the movement of empty vehicles. When you reach full automation, you have vehicles moving on the system that are empty. And what is not included in our forecasts of traffic is the empty vehicle movements. Even with the congestion I showed, if in 20 or 30 years you have empty automated vehicles moving through the system being positioned somewhere else, whether it's an Uber vehicle going back out to the suburbs or your private vehicle that you send home so your wife could use it, that traffic is not yet in our modeling. We're trying to figure out how to do that. And I'm talking about worldwide. We're trying to figure out how to do that. The other interesting thing about this is that many of you use Google Maps. It's amazing when I find the minimum time path from where I am to where I'm going, where Google takes me sometimes. Our traffic overload is going to move to the arterial system, sometimes neighborhood streets. And that's particularly true inside the urban core. So as these overloads continuously happen hour after hour, and we start to add 1 million more people in the urban core, we're going to see traffic congestion like we experience occasionally on Montrose at 5 o'clock or Bissonnette when 59 inbound is so congested people start shifting off because Uber's sending them there. That's the way our cars are going to work, even if they're driving automatically, is they're going to find minimum path. So what are the implications? First of all, these vehicles that are coming online, they're going to be a major change, but they're going to have many empty vehicle movements that are not accounted for in our thinking. These are some of the higher levels of automation that have been defined. This work came out of my Texas Southern work in automated vehicle technology. And the higher levels, level 3 is what we're seeing now, where you see a video of a guy in the bus and he's not touching the wheel and it's driving, but he's still there. He's ready to take control. That's level 3. Level 4 is where the driver can be removed, because within a certain operating environment, which may be not inclement weather, by the way, or in a certain geofenced area like inside 610 Loop or along this freeway, then the vehicle can operate in level 4. Level 5 is someday when the vehicle's smart enough, just like a human, to go anywhere it needs to go. But that's a ways down the road. In fact, we've done some forecasts of time frames. We're going to see in the near term level 3 and level 4 operations in places like protected campus environments. We have some plans at TSU with U of H to do some of that. You'll hear more about that some another time. But HOV lanes are perfect for beginning to automate bus operations in managed lanes and HOV lanes. And then in the longer term, level 4 automation, where there does not need to be a driver or even any type of attendant on board, will begin to occur in mixed traffic along city streets. And then in the long term, we'll even get to the level 5 where I can tell my car to take me to California and it'll take me there. So what are the implications of that? Scenario A, these are the things that are talked about at the conferences. Scenario A is that it's going to continuously get a decreasing number of cars because we're all going to share rides and the cars are automated. The roadway capacity is going to increase dramatically. And yeah, you can find somebody with a PhD that'll do theoretical calculations and say, we can double the capacity of that lane when we go to automation. The question is, will it be in time for us? And then also, vehicles can move empty. As a vehicle drops me off, it can go empty somewhere else to service somebody else. It can go empty to find a free parking spot like in front of your house if you live close by. Literally, these are the scenarios that could happen. But utopian is that the vehicle goes away and I don't need it and it comes back when I need it. This is one view. The other view is being called the dystopian view, which is where empty vehicle movements begin to drive traffic congestion to higher and higher levels. Even though capacity is increasing, this movement of empty vehicles and the ease at which that works begins to drive us into greater and greater levels of traffic congestion. And it's these, somewhere in that spectrum is where we'll end up. Nobody knows yet. We don't know where Houston's going to be. There's certain facilities that may be the utopian in their little world, and the rest of the situation may be the dystopian, or somewhere in between. The congestion results, I am convinced, when we add doubling of our population, is going to be massive congestion anyway. And we have to think about that as we deal with a policy framework. I will tell you this, I've talked with a researcher at TTI who's been doing particularly simulation-based analysis of the future world, and his conclusion to me in a brief conversation was capacities are going to go up and travel speeds are going to go down. The reason he says that is when you automate, and I've worked in automation my whole life, you have to control speeds in order for it to be safe. And when the machine is in control, the speeds could well come down in our average travel speeds. It's not going to be necessarily driving at 65 or 70 like a lot of you did when you were coming in on the freeway today, because of the safety aspects. How do we approach high-capacity transit in light of this? Let me get a little more positive now, sorry. Other parts of the world are addressing high-capacity transit and automated vehicle technology using a comprehensive planning approach. And they use a strategy to say, well, if we want to minimize empty vehicle movements, how do we build together a multimodal system where automated vehicles make sense in some areas, but we use high-capacity transit to convey people during over the parts of the system where empty vehicle movements could be very unproductive. And the Japanese have an interesting plan. I've been intrigued by the Japanese for years. This was in 2006. Toyota built this bus system, and they carried 2 million people at a expo in Japan that was automated bus operations, platooning, the very things we're talking about. They did it in 2006. So I've always been intrigued by the Japanese. And by the way, starting with this slide, it's missing from your notebook. So pay attention. You can't look it up later.
Why not? Can't you give us some of it?
I can. It's just it didn't get in there for what you've got in your notebook today.
We want it.
Okay.
We'll make sure everybody gets it.
Japan has a national policy, and their objective is to make life better for everyone. And they use very flowery terms. I've actually simplified this. You'll notice at the bottom of the page, their official name is a 12-word name for their program, and so they've created this acronym SIP-ADAS to represent this future plan for automation. And automated bus operations is integral to it, and it's integral to our future. But it's a way to view the way all the modes have to work together. This is an approach that looks at different parts of the region as having different needs. And they use the term villages, regional hub cities, and megacities. I relate this to the villages are rural or suburban areas, but they may also be urban districts that have populations of 5 to 10,000. The regional hub cities are centers that have education, medical, business, and they generally are ranging in up to 300,000 people. And then their megacities is where there's a concentrated population of 1 million or more. So I would view this as our suburban cities and developments, our major business districts like the energy corridor as you get closer to town, or Sugar Land or Woodlands. And then you have the mega city, which is the core of Houston, that has all this concentration of jobs and much higher density of people. So what is their plan? And these have interesting cartoons. So I pulled these from a presentation made by one of the leaders of ITS Japan at a automated vehicle symposium conference a couple years ago. But this is just showing that in their village, what might be a major activity center for us or a district, they have all of the automated vehicle operations, even private vehicle operations, make sense there. If my private vehicle can take me 5 miles away to where I could board transit and then I can send it home to park in the driveway, that's perfect. There's also automated vehicle service, might be Uber-like. There might be transit service that are small buses or vans that bring people to and from a hub where they can board higher capacity transit. And then that higher capacity transit links you to the employment centers, the major urban districts that themselves are interconnected with other high capacity. And you'll notice they still have rail in here. They're not doing away with rail, even though they're bringing in automated buses. And all of this works together to provide a connected, integrated system. And then these higher capacity urban centers are ultimately connected to the heart of the region, the megacity. They use the example of Tokyo. Well, for us, it's urban core of Houston. And it itself is connected to the mega region of Dallas, Austin, San Antonio by high-speed rail. And this is the type of layering of technologies and service concepts that we'll be talking about into an integrated system. And it uses the automation where it is most productive. So let me conclude. First of all, we need to identify all the necessary transit service types, the technologies, things we need to consider implementing over the next 30 years. We need to prepare for a transportation paradigm shift as this technology will change dramatically the way we view transportation. Tori's talk was excellent in telling us about how these things are going to change the way it works. Then we need to incorporate a new transit service concepts, technologies that complement what we have today. We don't have to throw away what we have today. We can add technology in and make it better. I was so intrigued because I've been thinking about it a lot, Bob, when you mentioned the challenges you're having with Uber and Lyft in curb space, because in some of the working papers that I've done on this research study, that's a key part. The operations to accommodate vehicles moving to and from the curb where people get in and out has to be part of our urban thinking, and we're not doing that. You're beginning to feel the pain that may become 100 times more an issue as that propagates and automation becomes real, and even the guy in his personal car just wants to get out at the curb and send it somewhere else. And that's a huge factor. And then finally, perform a well-integrated and fully coordinated plan that spans all the transit service concepts and technologies. I propose to you that high-capacity transit is not one corridor or one mode. It's all the modes integrated together, using technology to your advantage, using those modes where you can get 200 people in one vehicle connected with 10 other vehicles just as loaded down a particular corridor. We can't throw that idea away because there are going to be certain portions of our system where we have to move that many people. And so we'll be talking about that till the cows come home, I'm sure, over the next few months. Thank you very much.
We are running kind of late on our agenda. I still would hate to not give any opportunity for a question to Sam. Someone have a question they'd like to ask to him? Well, if not, let me tell you a little bit about where we're going from here. We're still going to get you out of here, hopefully by 2 o'clock. We are going to have our planning panel next, and we will have a little bit of reduced time for the work groups to meet. However, one of the primary outcomes from the work group meetings was to talk about when do we get together next, because today was not intended to be your major work session. We know you will need to meet together and have an opportunity to really sink your teeth into the different topics that the work groups are addressing. So with that, I'm going to invite Dr. Lewis to come forward, and the members of our planning panel will change out the titles over here. And Amanda, please join us for this. And we'll go right into this next session.